Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you for attending the webinar. My name is Kevin Rooney. I'm an engineer here at ATA Engineering. I've been working here for about 2.5 years and using Femap ever since. So today I'm going to show you guys some of the new features in Femap 11.2. So 11.2 came out in late March, just over a month ago. So hopefully some of you guys have it downloaded. If you do not, I'll show you guys how to do that towards the end of my webinar here. I'm going to demo some things in Femap for about 30 minutes, and then after that, open it up for a short question and answer session so you guys can, if you guys have any questions for me while we're on the phone. To start, I'm going to go through some geometry enhancements that the development team put into Femap 11.2. The first one is in the geometry curve from surface, and I'm going to use this pad feature. This tool, the pad tool, was in previous versions of Femap, but they have updated it and enhanced it to work for different types of geometry and different holes and slots. So to start, I'm going to use this offset distance. This is one of the new features. Not previously, you just had this factor, and that factor was essentially a scale multiplier for the radius of your hole. Now, so you don't have to do that math in your head, you can just input an easy offset distance here. So the pad is going to be 10 units away. In this case, it's going to be millimeters away from your hole. I'm going to also add a washer, and then I'm going to leave this auto align option in there. Now I'm going to go in and select the edge, hit OK. And Femap put in that pad feature very easily around the slot. And not only is this a normal slot, these edges here are angled slightly, and the pad feature handled that very nicely in Femap 11.2. Now, I'm going to do this again, but this time I'm going to use I'm going to do it on these holes here. Again, I'm going to put in 10, and I'm going to add a washer. But this time I'm going to show you some of these other alignment options for this pad feature. I'm going to use the vector align option. Select this hole up here. Now it's going to ask me, how do you want to align your pad? I'm just going to select these 2 points, there and there. There's my vector. Hit OK. And you see how the edge of that pad feature is now aligned with that vector. This is a good segue into another cool selection feature that was added in 11.2. It's called this Smart Snap option right here. It allows you to snap to either points, curves, or nodes, and it'll find whatever's closest to your selection arrow, and it will automatically put that into your ID or whatever you're looking for. So I'm going to run this command once again, this pad option, offset distance of 10. I'm going to add a washer, and this time I'm going to do the tangent align to show you what this one does. Select this curve here, and I'm going to align it to this edge. And Femap finds the shortest distance between your whole curve and that tangent curve that you selected, and it puts one of the edges of your pad feature normal to that shortest distance. Another easy way to put a pad in exactly how you want it if you want your elements to be oriented in a certain direction. Finally, I'm going to go over this offset curve washer. Again, this tool was included in previous versions of Femap. However, they have enhanced it to work for different types of geometry. So here, I'm going to use the offset curves option, and I'm going to offset this by a value of 5. hit OK. And now I'm going to select all of these edges, these 4 edges here, and hit OK. You see how Femap takes those edges, blows them out. In this case, since I put a factor of, or a value off the distance of 5, this distance from here to here, the distance of that line is going to be 5. So you can vary that. In terms of the pad feature, when we put 10, the value from this point here to that point there is 10. So that's the definition of your offset distance. All right, so those are the pad and washer updates. Now I'm going to go into the new slicing tool. If you remember from Femap 11.1, they had this geometry solid slice, and there was also 2 other slice options, slice match and slice along face. Now they have simplified that and made it just one command, the slice command. They redid this dialog box here to include all of those options that those 2 other slice commands previously had in previous versions. So now they've added a few things. One of them is this cross-section option. And you can also not only slice with a plane or along a face, but now you can select a sheet solid or a curve. So in this case, I want to create a cross-section of my solid with some of these curves. I'm going to tell it that I want to put it along a vector that I specify. And I'm going to hit the repeated slicing button, which allows me to slice the same solid with multiple curves. So select that solid there. And I'm going to use that curve and that curve. Hit OK. In this case, I'm going to specify a direction in the positive Y. And there we go. It created those 2 cross sections. And as you can see up here, that's this surface that it's showing me. Now, since I had that repeated slicing command selected, it's asking me for another curve to slice with. I'm going to hit OK, and then this time I'm going to use the negative Y direction and slice across there. And there you go. Again, we have another cross-section slice. Now I'm just going to use the regular slice option. This match faces across slice is very helpful when you're obviously moving forward and meshing this part next. What that does is essentially creates identical faces on both sides of your slice, so that when you set up meshing or you're meshing, it'll put coincident nodes on both of those faces, and from there you can automatically merge the nodes. So here, I'm going to do the with curve option again, and I'm going to hit OK. I want to slice that guy. Select curve, I'm going to do that circle up there. And in this case, I'm going to do the -1 vector. And there we go. It created the 2 separate solids right there. And now those faces match. So again, in meshing, it'll put coincident nodes along those faces, so you can not worry about a connection if that's how you want to connect your model. Now finally, just to show you guys the last option, here I have some arbitrary surface that was made from a spline, and I moved some points around on that surface. That's an option I'll show you next. We can do the same thing with the geometry solid slice, but we can do it with the sheet solid in this case. So again, I'm going to slice that. I'm going to use this solid here. And there we go. It created those separate bodies just from those arbitrary curves or arbitrary surfaces. All right. Now, as I alluded to just a few moments ago, in Femap 11.2, you also have the ability to move points that are connected to solids or surfaces or curves. In previous versions, if you tried to move some points, it would say can't do it because it's attached to a solid. Now, in Femap 11.2, you can do that. So I'm going to start by just doing a simple move by point. I'm going to move these 4 points. And also, as I explained earlier, I'm going to use some of that smart snap selection options, and I'm going to select that point, and now I'm going to select this curve, and by selecting a curve, it gives me the midpoint of that curve. That's what XCU mid means. Now that I have that selected, hit my preview button, there's where it's going to move it, hit OK, slides all of my points over without giving me an error on the fact that it's connected to another surface. You can also use the move to command very similarly. If we do the modify move to point, say I want to move that guy and I want to move him to the same location as that, but in this case I only want to move him in the Z direction. Possibly you can move him in any direction and see how that point moved up there very nicely. The development team has also added some defeaturing tools, or some enhancements to the defeaturing tools, one of which is in the meshing toolbox. It's going to be in the feature removal. The loops, curves, and surfaces options were in there in Femap 11.1, but now they've added blends, and they've also enhanced this curves option. So I'm going to select curves, and I'm going to use the selection button, select that curve there, throws that out. I'm going to select this blend in the corner, it throws that out. If I want to get rid of these guys, I have to use the dialog selection because there's multiple curves that it will need to remove simultaneously. So I can select that curve, and that curve there, hit OK, and it removes those. A pretty quick and easy way to defeature your geometry and simplify it for meshing. To go over the blends, I'm going to bring back my solid body that this mid-surface was made from originally. And if we are going to mid-surface it, we're starting from scratch, this is a new part, we probably don't need these little blends that are in there because those aren't going to be in our mid-surface. So they've added this feature removal blends option. I'm going to say I want to remove all blends that are smaller than unit size 2. Select my solid, and very easily it removed all of these blends here because those blends were smaller than size 2. Very quick and easy way, again, to simplify your geometry for meshing. So those are some of the geometry options. There's a few others that I'll briefly touch on later in the presentation. Now moving on to actual modeling updates, what you can do when you're making your FEA. Using rigid elements sometimes can be a little bit tedious. If you have a rigid element that's attached to 100 nodes, it was often difficult if you wanted to remove, a subset group of those. To combat that, the development team added this mesh editing rigid connectivity button. So from here, I'm going to select this rigid, and it highlights it, and now I can easily go in and remove certain parts or certain nodes that are currently attached. So let's say I want to get rid of all these nodes right here out of my rigid. You can do it with one click. Oh, maybe I want to add that guy back in and that guy. You can do it with one click from this rigid connectivity button. Very quick, very easy to do. Another cool option that the development team has added is also in this mesh editing. This one's called Edge Split. Again, this was in a previous version of Femap. However, they've enhanced it. Now you have the option to use biasing. If you want to create multiple cuts through your thickness and you want to have different thicknesses of those layers, I guess you could call it. So very similar form to previously. You select your 2 nodes, you give it the number of splits. I'm going to say I want to split it 3 times to give me a total of 4 layers of elements. I'm going to say I want a bias of 2.0 at the ends, meaning that the elements on the outside or at the ends of my thickness are going to be half as thick as the ones in the middle. So I have this view option, the shrink view option, but to turn that off, you can see how these 2 rows of elements in the middle are twice as thick as the elements on the ends. So you have those new biasing options as well. There's also some cool defeaturing or geometry editing tools that they've added. These are also in the meshing toolbox in feature editing. Previously, this translate surface, rotate surface, and resize whole was in there, but they've added this edit and offset button, or options, radio button. So let's test out this edit. Let's say that the designers have come back with a design change, and this fillet needs to be a little bit smaller because there's some clearance issues with maybe some wiring or some electronics inside this rib. I'm going to use the edit. I'm going to use this auto extend button. What the auto extend button does is grabs all surfaces that are related to whatever surface you pick. So in this case, if I come in and I select that fillet right there, using the auto extend option is going to grab this fillet and these fillets on the back side that are touching that surface I selected. By not specifying a value, by leaving it as 0, it brings up this dialog that says, this is the current fillet radius. What do you want to change it to? It recognizes that that surface was a fillet. So now let's say I want to change it to 5. And as you can see, it changed all of not only the surface I selected, which is this one, but it changed these guys here too because they were connected. And now once I enter that value, it automatically put it in here, and I'm still selecting in the meshing toolbox. So again, I can click there, 1 click, and it changes that value. Now using the offset option is very similar. This time, this slot here maybe was a little bit too big. There's a little bit of play if that was the connection point, or if there was just wiring, maybe it doesn't need to be as big, or it needs to be a little bit stronger. We can use the offset, again with the auto extend. It's going to grab the surfaces that are related to the surface I'm selecting, and I'm going to offset it by a value of 5. So if I click right there, it moves in all of those surfaces by a value of 5, and essentially just offset the surfaces that I was looking at. We can also do the same thing by selecting this surface where it moves it out. It's a very useful tool for very quick editing of your geometry. They've also added some really cool automatic options for editing the thickness of your mid-surfaces if you're using shell or plate elements. This comes in handy when you have maybe a composite layup where you have a lot of shells on the same plane, but those shells need to have different thicknesses. In one of the newer NX Nastran releases, they've added the option to update the thickness of specific elements right on the element card, on the C quad 4 or the C quad 8. Previously, that C quad 4 or C quad 8 card pointed to a P shell card or a property card, and that property card contained the thickness. Now you can override that thickness using this element thickness that you can specify. So here in this model, here's my solid. It looks like a cross section with a few fins, maybe for some heat, for a heat transfer analysis. we've gone through and we've mid-surfaced it. There's our mid-surfaces that are associated with our solid geometry. And not only that, but we've meshed it. Right now I have the thickness on, thickness and cross-section, so we're looking at the total thickness. So now if we compare that to our solid, you know, right here it's not matching up very well because, again, all of these elements are looking at that one property card, and that property card has an incorrect thickness for our tapering fin. So to fix that, we're going to use the modify, update elements, and we're going to select the mid-surface thickness and offset. I'm going to keep the defaults. It's asking me if I want to select elements to change or if I want to select the mid-surfaces that have elements associated to them. And it's going to ask me which solid you want to point to. I'm going to use mid-surfaces in the automatic. Hit OK. I need to bring back up my mid-surfaces. I'm going to select that mid-surface there and that guy. Hit OK. And now you can see how it edited the thickness of those elements individually to kind of match my solid better. That tool is very good if you have a lot of elements where you need to edit the size, or if you're not necessarily using a taper, but maybe just a different thickness. So this is pretty good for some analyses, but if you want a little bit more accuracy, or you need that high fidelity mesh, we can use another tool to kind of fix these little differences here. Again, that's also in modify, update elements, adjust plate thickness and offset. This is very good when you want to taper a single element. So here, I'm going to select that element there. It's going to ask this dialog box. They did have it in 11.1, but they've updated it for 11.2 to have a few more options. Now you can see exactly what you're changing. As I discussed earlier, you can change the element thickness, which overrides the property thickness, or you can update that element offset for your shell elements. There's also these buttons to reset the element thickness and element offset, so then, again, it will just point directly to the property thickness. So in this case, I want to vary between the nodes. I want to vary from there to there, and I want to vary from value 2 to 3. Hit OK, regenerate, and now you can see how that changed that element to taper exactly with my geometry. And again, that works great if you want to taper individual elements. Use that mid-surface thickness and offset tool if you want to do multiple at once. All right. Finally, some of the post-processing enhancements that the development team added in Femap 11.2. One of the biggest ones is a different type of Freebody. So let's create a new Freebody. In the manager, hit new Freebody. I'm going to call this section. And not only is it a Freebody only display mode or the interface load display mode, now they've added the section cut. In general, the section cut is nearly identical to the interface load. However, instead of selecting elements and nodes manually, you simply select a plane or a curve, and Femap will go in and automatically find the elements and nodes that are on that plane or near that plane. So some of the options we have when we hit section cut, I'm going to select it not using a plane, but I am going to select a curve here. It automatically defaults to selecting a curve. However, I'm going to change it. I want to select curve right here, this curve 7. Now by doing that, it defaults to putting the summation right on that curve. If I want to change that option, if I want it to sum around the Freebody node centroid, I can do that. Now it's summing around the middle here of my bridge. There's an option to align the sum to your path. So right now, it looks like that output is in the global coordinate system. Let's say I need it to be aligned with my model. I can just hit that button there, and now you can see it puts the x-axis along my curve. The development team added a few kind of handy toggle buttons to the Freebody tool. These buttons here are new. They're simply toggle buttons to turn on and off the vector and or moment. This is the force vector by itself. This is the moment vector by itself. And then this button here is to toggle between resultant loads and individual component loads. So right now, you can see there's a lot of loads being shown. I don't really want to see the nodal vector, so I'm going to turn that completely off. And just so we can see it a little bit better, I'm just going to show the curves. This button here for the section cut shows you what plane you're currently working with. So you can see it popped up right here. Again, the same as the other two display modes, you can show your elements and nodes that it's grabbing. And then these two buttons here are to actually slide through your curve. You can offset your section by a certain percentage of that curve in this case. And if I say move up 10%, see how it's moving along that curve, and the values are updating as I move. Another way to do that is using this little location slider button here, and I can grab it and move it along that curve as far as I want and get different outputs. So if you take those loads and maybe you put them into Excel to see how they match your hand calculations, you can export those sums at maybe individual percentage offsets of your plane. You can export it using the list current free body summation to the data table, or you can export it down here to the messages window as well. Another cool option that they've added is this thing called analysis studies. Essentially, analysis studies are groups for your result sets, your output sets. So now if you have multiple analyses, like right here we're looking at the linear statics results. Let's say we want to run a normal modes result. Let me just run this real quick. Takes about 3 seconds to run in NX Nastran, which is built in to Femap, a little different than the other Nastrans. See it finished. And now, automatically it added this normal modes study separately. And here are all my modes of my structure. These analysis studies, there's a few options with them. You can envelope over those studies if you want to find the max min value. There's the option to create a new output to envelope that output set or create the new result set in the database, meaning it will add space to your ModFem. Or there's the option to not add it to the database where it won't save it in the ModFem specifically. It's more of an on-the-fly or a temporary result set. So that gives you some flexibility to maybe you don't need to see those results tomorrow or moving forward. You can not put it in the database, just look at it really quick. When you create it in the database, it's going to be a little bit longer initial creation. If you don't create it in the database, it's going to be on the fly really fast. But every time you view those results, it's going to take a little bit longer to calculate. So it's 6 and 1/2 dozen the other, depending on your individual situation. Another feature that the development team added in 11.2 is the ability to view beam contours on the normal contour plot. So if we look at our bridge here, we see plate elements right here, which right now is our first contour. And then we also see beam max combined stress as our second contour. And that's right here on these curves. So again, just an easier way to view your results. Finally, one of the things that I find very convenient, the development team added a different way to check your elements. So here at ATA, we make a lot of advanced FEMs. We spend a lot of time building our FEMs. So it's very important to ensure that those FEMs match the physical model as much as possible and that there's no small errors. This saves us a lot of time in the future for debugging. So we do a lot of element checks. Let's say I want to look at all of my elements. Previously, Femap had these straightforward element checks looking at aspect ratio or warping of particular elements. But now in Femap 11.2, they've also added the exact same NX-Nastran quality checks that you would find if you were running NX-Nastran. These checks are probably similar to the other versions of Nastran. However, these checks do correlate directly with NX-Nastran as specifically. So all of those geom check options from NX-Nastran are now included here. And again, this will save you time before you hit the analyze or the run button, so you can ensure that there won't be any geometry errors. So a few other enhancements that they included in 11.2 that I don't really have time to demo. They added some mid-surface extend tools. So when you're mid-surfacing a model, it's a solid model. A lot of times you have small gaps between your mid-surfaces where they're not connecting. They've added tools where you can extend those surfaces to other surfaces. This is very convenient when you're mid-surfacing. You can also project curves and points on surfaces from within the meshing toolbox. So if you already have a mesh on your mid-surfaces, you can project those curves and points, and it'll automatically update the mesh to match your changes. They've made a few they've changed a few commands to work with non-manifold bodies. That's very convenient. You can now delete surfaces of a solid, and it will allow you to do that. It will just change that solid into a stitched sheet solid. They've enhanced the contact manager. They've given you some additional C-bush orientation and offset options. You can update your element normal directions for plate elements all in one click. If you want to all point them in one direction, that's pretty convenient. You can force it to put multiple pets through a thickness. That's a new option. They've added a lot of solver support, particularly for MSC Nastran and contact in MSC Nastran. Some additional options they've added in NX Nastran, ANSYS, and LS Dyna. They've enhanced performance graphics to work with coordinate systems, material directions, point elements, and line elements. And they've also increased the performance of performance graphics when dynamically rotating, a few other options there. If any of you guys use the 3D mouse or the space ball, they fixed that freeze issue. It was a driver issue with the actual Spaceball driver. So now that's been fixed. If you want to see all or the complete documentation, all of it can be found in your Femap 11.2 installation folder in the /pdf/newfeat.pdf. If you guys know ATA as your VAR, maybe you've seen this website. If you know ATA as a services company, you should check out ata-plmsoftware.com. This is our new dedicated Siemens VAR software website. There's a lot of free resources, and this will show you our class schedule. This is a way to request support. There's a lot of different cool options on here. I would advise that all of you go check this website out. If you are our VAR customer, I hope that you guys are continuing to use the technical support hotline. When you use this hotline, you reach engineers here at ATA like me within a few minutes. It's the fastest way to get support. And if you are our VAR customer, we ask you that you come to us first with your questions and if we need to escalate that up to Siemens, we can do that from our end. If you're not one of our customers, feel free to give us a call once and see how you like us. We like to pride ourselves on our support, so we always like to have new people try us out once or twice and see how we can help you. As promised, here are the links to download Femap 11.2. If you're current on maintenance, you can download the software, the license files, using your WebKey account. If you don't have a WebKey account, you can get in touch with me to give you your SOL2 and host ID to create one. If you're not on maintenance, you can contact me and we can figure out how to get you back on maintenance. So with that, I'm going to unmute all of you guys. If you're on the phone, I believe you do actually have to be on the phone to ask me a question. But feel free to ask me some questions. All right, we have a question on the chat window about the rigid connectivity tool. If you can add nodes that weren't originally in there, and yes, that works very easily. You can just select a new node and it'll add it right into your rigid element. We had another question if this presentation is going to be available for review. Yes, I am recording it. I'm going to kind of cut it a little bit and then put it up on our website at ata-plmsoftware.com to use as an on-demand webinar if you guys want to show this to any of your colleagues or review it later. Another question on the Freebody. The question is, does the Freebody system allow for checking of cross-sectional properties? I do not think so. I guess if your question is if you want to kind of get a overall property of a cross-section that might include solid, shell, or beam elements, the Freebody tool simply looks at the grid point force output from Nastran, so it will only give you forces and moments that are on your structure. It won't actually give you the properties of that cross-section that you're slicing. All right, I'll hang out for a few more minutes, but if you guys don't have any questions, thank you very much for attending. I hope this was beneficial, and again, I'll post this on ata-plmsoftware.com in the next few days here. Thanks a lot for attending.